in politics, the president has an enormous lift in front of him and less than half the country behind him. A new CNN poll out this hour puts the president's approval rating at just 45%. So on the eve of an address to the nation, does the president still have the political capital, the mojo, to sway the country on Syria? Let's bring in our panel, co-host of CNN's Crossfire, Van Jones, CNN political contributor Kevin Madden, and Washington correspondent for The New Yorker magazine, Ryan Lizza. Kevin, these numbers, I would think if I were in the president's political team, I'd look at them and I'd be distressed. Only 9% of Republicans and 26% of independents approve of how the president is handling Syria. He obviously needs Republicans and independents behind him on this. He can't do it with just Democrats. How can he move those numbers? He has these 6 interviews with anchors, including Wolf Blitzer tonight, and the address to the nation tomorrow.
You know, I don't think he can right now. I think, you know, it's important to remember that most of the time, public opinion is a process, not an event. So the idea that you can just go with an Oval Office address and some interviews with network anchors and change public opinion in such a short amount of time, I just don't think it can happen. But what he has to do in order to make some headway up on Capitol Hill, which is the crucial audience right now, is he has to talk about having an integrated, comprehensive strategy to change the situation on the ground. That, I think, is what has frustrated most people up until this point.
So not just the strike, but what comes after.
Correct.
I think that's right. He's got to tell a story that helps people understand the context here. What's been going on in Syria. Syria has not been on anybody's mind. In fact, the president has sort of tried to keep it out of the public conversation in some important ways because he didn't want to be pushed into action. He's got to give people a story about Syria, its past, its present, what he wants to do. But I think at some point you got to face reality here. He is not likely to prevail in Congress. And I think he's got at this part, people in D.C. got to start thinking, we can't have this vote. Right. We can't have
you mean the
this
Senate
vote.
and the House? Or
the Senate and the House.
Both.
Kick it downfield. 45 days, 90 days, maybe the gaffe that saves the world, maybe John Kerry's gaffe will save us somehow, but we got to play for time here. We can't be in a situation where the Congress of the United States shoots down the president, unprecedented, on this war, but we also can't go to war.
Ryan, you and I were talking about before the show.
Yeah.
The president goes to Congress. There's inevitably going to be some anti-war Democrats that vote against any military involvement and some anti-war Republicans, the Rand Pauls of the world. Yeah. But there is a vast majority that are willing to be convinced. He has not made the sale to them yet. Why not?
That's right. If you take away the isolationist libertarian wing on the right and the anti-war wing on the left, you still have a middle in this country and in the Congress that is theoretically willing to give the president support for military action. But he's won the case, I think, on the fact that Assad has chemical weapons. Nobody disagrees with that. I think he's basically won the case that Assad or the regime has used these chemical weapons. I don't think there's a serious case against that. But why has he lost this broad middle that should be in favor of action? He hasn't made the case of what this pinprick strike would actually do. He hasn't made the argument of what it is we're defending. What is the national security interest here? An international norm is not something that the American people often rally to go to war in favor of. And I think that's his challenge tomorrow night is he'll have to lay out the case again on the intelligence, but why is it the U.S.'s role to attack Syria over this chemical attack?
And I think it's worse than you say. What you say is pretty tough, but there are people who you would expect to be in that persuadable middle. For instance, you take a congresswoman like Tulsi Gabbard, who we talked about before. She's a Democrat. She's from his home state. She's 31 years old. She's an Iraq War veteran. You would think if anybody would come to ride to the guns and support the president, maybe she would. She looked at this stuff. She came out today and she said no. Tammy Duckworth, another veteran, says no. So he's actually, it's not just a sort of wild anti-war left in the party, of which I might be a part. It's actually people who are right there in the center that also are not with him.
There's no constituency for this war right now.
And let me just read this statement from Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, a combat veteran of the Iraq War. As you mentioned, quote, as a soldier, I understand that before taking any military action, our nation must have a clear tactical objective, a realistic strategy, the necessary resources to execute that strategy, including the support of the American people, and an exit plan. The proposed military action against Syria fails to meet any of these criteria. That's a Democrat from Hawaii.
Who is an Iraq, who's a veteran. She's a military kind of centrist, more of that kind of a voice. That's where you know he's in trouble.
Yeah, and that's the big problem here. This goes to both Van and Ryan's point. The president from the very beginning has been lacking any clarity on the mission. He's lacked it in making that case with the American public, and he's lacked it with Capitol Hill. What he has tomorrow night is an extraordinary opportunity to talk with just his voice directly to the American people. No filter. Yeah. I do not think it's enough time because he hasn't engaged earlier on this, but it is an extraordinary opportunity. What he does with it will be interesting.
And let's talk about that mixed message. Earlier today, something else Secretary of State John Kerry said is he described the strike on Syria as an unbelievably small, limited kind of effort. That's Kerry's words, unbelievably small. Senator John McCain, a supporter of intervention, said that is unbelievably unhelpful.
Yeah, it's complicated.
They're trying to thread this needle here,
Yeah.
where it's like it's going to make a big change in Syria to get people who are more interventionist types and saying it's not going to be that big a deal.
Well, I mean, it is a big challenge here because, I've said before, he's trying to be half hawk and half dove, and that kind of bird doesn't fly in Washington, D.C. So, but here is a president who, I think in a good way, is reluctant to go to war. He's not a warmonger. He's not a muscular, let's go shoot him up kind of cowboy character. And he's put in a situation where he's trying to figure out what to do. And he's kind of taken the country with him on this walk. I think the walk around the White House has to stop. He's got to take a stand tomorrow and make his case. I don't think he's going to pull Democrats like me along, but he's got to recover as a leader now.
Ron, I want to give you the last word, but before I do, Van will just have to table this for a future conversation. I think there are people who would look at drones and counterterrorism and disagree with you on the militaristic thing. We'll table that for now.
Fair enough.
Ryan.
Well, look, this is there's a certain incoherence to the case, right? He wants to do something that will prevent Assad from using these weapons again, but to sell it to an anti-war base on both the left and the right, he's saying we're not really going to war.
Yeah.
And he's got to fix that incoherence tomorrow.
All right, great.